one man, who wishes to remain anonymous, and his wife and their dog, all who reside near Irwin, Tennessee, in Unicoi County. He and his wife claimed to have had several encounters with the ferocious creature. He stated the first time he saw the creature was when he and his wife were both watching TV in their living room, around 8 p.m. when they saw a deformed-looking man's face appear in the window. They were both startled. His wife literally screamed in terror. It looked at them, and smiled evilly, and then bolted into the woods. They did in fact call the cops. But nothing was found after police investigated the yard and surrounding area. That night he and his wife, who couldn't sleep and had a gun nearby, were in bed when they heard unpleasant laughter from outside the window, around 11 p.m. The chuckle was hysterical in nature. The man grabbed his rifle, and walked out to his porch yelling at them, "Get the hell out of here," and firing 2 shots into the ground. He witnessed not one, but 2 creatures fleeing into the woods from behind his shed. He was so disturbed by their presence that he barricaded and locked the door behind himself. He tried later to go back to bed with his wife, but neither of them could sleep. His wife usually lets their dog out in the morning. But the next day, the dog did not want to go outside to do her business, and then when she did, she scratched at the front door to be let back in. Since his wife let her out that morning, the dog has not been seen. His wife had another sighting last week. She drove home from the grocery store, and while unloading them from her pickup, she noticed something up in the trees. She noticed a strange man-like figure staring at her, and grinning widely from up in the tree. She rushed to her truck and drove back to her husband's office. They're both at a loss on what to do because the cops aren't finding anything, and they don't feel like they're being taken seriously. He did, however, install a number of security cameras. He and his wife are still seeing things, but they're mostly up in the trees. They've quit calling the cops, since they never discover anything, and they've assured him and his wife that they'll almost certainly see campers in the woods. His wife said that she can tell when the feral wild males are close by, because of the odor. Her husband said his wife seemed to be having more sightings than he has recently. The primitive wild creatures, they feel, are more interested in the wife. They've had another scare of someone peering through their window, and they describe the face as like a very wicked Smeagol from Lord of the Rings, with hit and miss strings of long hair on its almost bald head. They both heard the lunatic type of laughter, late at night in the woods. The Tennessee Wildman was first recorded in the 1800s. Residents were warned of the Tennessee Wildman prowling near Piney, an area in McNairy County, West Tennessee, by the newspaper the Hagerstown Mail, on March 5, 1871. While attempting to carry women away, this Wildman approached them with wild, horrifying screams. He was characterized as a tall man with a lot of muscle mass, and dark matted hair. He also ran fast enough to defy both men and dogs. Also in McNairy County, Tennessee, another story that appeared on September 2, 1878, in the Knoxville Daily Tribune, claims that a doctor named O.G. Broiler caught the beast and put him on display in a cage, where anyone could see him for a modest fee. It finally broke loose one day, escaping into the forests of the area. The description of the Tennessee Wildman is very similar to that of Sasquatch, except it looks more human. The Wildman stands between 7 and 9 feet tall, according to legend. His hair is dark gray or dark ginger, and his eyes are piercing red. His appearance is accompanied by a fearsome war cry that can make even the most fearless of men shudder, as well as a foul stink, which many have compared to the skunk ape, another Bigfoot-type creature. There has been many encounters with the creature over the years. In 1957 near Jackson, Tennessee, James Meacham, who was 15 years old, claimed to have witnessed one. He shot at it repeatedly, but he claimed the bullets had no effect on the creature. A Knoxville Journal article published on September 24, 1959. With the headline, "Deputies Hunt Monster." The article said, Knox County deputies were searching the northeast section of Knox County last night for somebody or something that 2 Claps Road residents fired 2 shotgun blasts at, and described as being 8 to 10 feet tall, and weighing more than 200 pounds. Earl Taylor, a 24-year-old father of 2 small children, first saw what he described as some kind of a monster when it came to the window on the front porch of his house. "When I saw the thing, I ran to the door and it ran," Taylor explained. "So I went across the road to a neighbor's, John Rosenbaum. We sat under a tree in the yard to see if it would return. We had been sitting in the yard for a few minutes when we heard two loud thumps on my car," Taylor continued. "The two men ran to the side of the house where the car was parked and saw something run toward the woods," deputies reported. This is when Rosenbaum, a 24-year-old Tucker Steel Company employee, fired 2 shotgun blasts at the creature, according to reports. "I shot twice from about 30 to 45 feet away," Rosenbaum said. "I don't believe it was human. It was too big and moved too fast and quiet." Deputies said there were 2 long scratches on the hood of Taylor's car, which he and several of the neighbors said were not there when they polished the car earlier in the day. Brenda Ann Adkins stated in the spring of 1968. "In the early spring of last year, I drove up to Mount Eagle Mountain, north of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and stopped to shoot some color photographs of the scenery. I left my camera in the car and went for a walk along the cliff edge to find a good position for some photos. Then there was a movement in the trees behind me as I was peering over the mountain. I also noticed a strange, unpleasant stench, as though something had died. The beast stepped out of the brush and lumbered towards the 19-year-old girl. I was completely paralyzed by terror," she said. "This creature had to have been at least 7 feet tall and weighed several hundred pounds. I'll never forget his massive chest, as well as his massive arms and legs. His entire body was covered with blackish red hair. The face looked like a cross between an ape and a human. He had me trapped on the ledge of a cliff. Then the beast stood between her and her car. That afternoon still gives me nightmares," she said. "He was growling and appeared to be angry. I was afraid he was going to force me off the edge or something. Then he came to a standstill about 6 feet away from me, cocked his head in a puzzled manner, and simply stared at me. He seemed to smile, made a tiny blubbering noise, and strolled back into the brush after a few moments of studying me. The young woman raced to her car and sped off to Monteagle. I went to a nearby eatery. She said, I was shaking so badly that I spilled coffee on my dress. A man approached me and asked if I needed some help. When I told him what happened, he replied it was most likely a bear. Because I was practically in shock, I agreed with him. He most probably thought I was crazy. The young woman has been to the mountain twice more in the hopes of seeing the beast. Miss Adkins explained, my father works in Chattanooga and he accompanied me. He was armed with a large deer rifle, but I doubt if it would be enough to stop one of those beasts. Mrs. Robertson's 4-year-old son Gary was playing in the yard on April 26, 1976, when his mother heard him screaming. When she went outside to check, she noticed a horrible odor that reminded her of a skunk or dead rats. Then she noticed a massive, ape-like figure running across the yard, heading for the house. It was 7 or 8 feet tall and seemed to be completely covered with hair, she told detectives. It pushed out its long hairy arms at Gary, coming within inches of him. The panicked mother scooped him up, dashed inside the house, and closed the door only seconds before the shaggy beast could get him. When she found the courage to peek out the window, she noticed a huge black figure disappearing into the woods. Groups of lawmen and hunters armed with shotguns and rifles came on her farm minutes after she reported the event to police. They made the decision to find and kill the beast. They searched the woods on the outskirts of town all night. They never found anything, but the creature yelled at them and pummeled them with rocks on at least 2 occasions. The hunters discovered some 16-inch footprints the next day, as well as hair, blood, and mucus. The hair was examined scientifically, but it was unable to be identified. One of the most famous accounts happened in Rockwood. The small town of Rockwood, Tennessee, is secluded along the Appalachians foothills, just west of Knoxville. Mark Epperson, a welder, and Dr. Frank Epperson, a pastor, had their own encounter, as they told in their own words. Mark, their younger son, entered high school, and the family moved from the city to Rockwood. Their mother then started warning them about the woods. She was a Cherokee Indian, and she used to talk about the Tennessee Wildman. He said my mother had advised my brother and me to stay out of the woods, because there was a dangerous wild man in there. The Epperson brothers were settling in for Sunday supper at their mother's mountain cabin one night in December 1981, after a long day's work. The hills had been running with talk of a predator on the loose recently, and there was a flood of reports that animals were missing during the month of December that year. Something just appeared in the yard and disappeared. Whatever it was massive. It was extremely loud, it was the size of a bear. In the yard, things are moving around, and trash is being turned over. This kind of activity was not expected in our area. Then these things start happening to us all of a sudden. I heard the dog barking and asked my brother what it was. He replied, "I'm not sure. Something has him barking." We heard something outside the house around 7 o'clock. It was a noise like something had fallen over. It was a strange bark that I never heard from him before. He did not want to be seen, and that was not our dog. I reached for my pistol and put it in my belt. When I realized someone was on our property, I thought I was going to face a robber, a burglar, or someone who would vandalize or steal something from us. I went to the right of the house when we went outside. My brother went to the left, and into the wood line. I went around the back of the house, and up the side of the garden. I walked to the wood's edge, and started smelling this odor. Then I noticed it. The creature was holding this dog in his hands, and the dog was whimpering, and you could see fear in this dog's eyes. The thing then turned around and left. At that point, my thoughts turned to my brother. It was getting close to him. "Frank," I yelled, "it's coming towards you." It was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. I didn't think we were going to make it out alive. It was getting close to him. And I heard something huge moving in the wooded area, so I realized I was going to meet this thing face to face. So I raised my pistol, and waited for him to appear through the woods. And I was on the verge of pulling the trigger. His eyes were the first thing I saw. They appeared to be lights. They appeared to me to have their own intensity. And it was at that point that I realized, I was facing something I had never experienced before. It is a monster, it's horrible. I thought, does this thing know that I'm armed? I wondered. Is it possible that he knows that? Does he have an intelligence about him? Then, all of a sudden, there's what sounds like a war cry. It let out a scream that would scare anyone, make anyone's hair stand up. What was running through my mind was, shoot or don't shoot, that was the question. The time has now come. I shot twice with my pistol when he took a step to lunge at me. Then he screams and backs up. It reminded me of an ambulance siren. The thing was yelling at me. It was beyond belief. We felt very fortunate and lucky to be alive and unhurt. "This is the Tennessee Wildman," Mark said as he grabbed my shoulders, and then I realized that all of these stories were true. The unknown is the most frightening thing about the wild man for me. What this thing is capable of, we don't know. We don't know what mindset it has. A lot of people believe it is a friendly creature who lives in the woods, and just would like to be left alone. But there are also those who believe it is a monster, and believe this creature is very dangerous. Generations have told the story of a half-man, half-beast roaming the woods in the eastern Tennessee mountains. The wild man is what they call it. Some say the bipedal beast is a relative of Sasquatch, even though it is distinctive in many ways. It's smaller than the Sasquatch. Many believe the wild man and Bigfoot are enemies, battling over remote lands in the Appalachian Mountains. The Tennessee Wildman is very territorial, in my opinion. Knowing that is essential in understanding why they become violent. They yell and they scream, they shake the trees. I believe they could hurt someone if they wanted. Rob Phillips, the founder of Paranormal Technology Investigations, stated he encountered the Tennessee Wildman on a summer night in 1997, while visiting the Watauga Cliffs with his cousin, Randy Sparks. They observed something strange in the forest around them, as they made their way to the cliffs in the rain, he claimed. Everything in the woods seemed to come to a halt, Phillips recalled. There was no sound at all. Then there was this scream, followed by twigs snapping. It was unlike anything we'd ever heard. It didn't sound like a human or an animal. After that, we took off. Phillips and his cousin became separated in the dark woods. Phillips huddled behind a tree and remained still, scared to move or make any noise. The noises of twigs snapping as they were stepped on all around him. That noise vanished completely, but he heard it again, this time coming from the trees above him. Then he observed an enormous figure about 15 feet in front of him, and 20 feet up a tree. He added, "I noticed it in the tree, then I saw my cousin, and we took off. We made it to the top of the hill, and it was roaring at the bottom. We ran for the cars and escaped." The Tennessee Wildman, according to Phillips, was around 9 feet tall. It was coated with charcoal gray fur that wasn't shaggy or fine, he said. He described the creature as having crimson beady eyes, lengthy arms, and sharp-looking claws. But it was the wild man's odor that drew his attention initially. "I noticed a foul odor like if something had died. It smelled like a body that had been left out in the sun after death." He claimed that he and his cousin were very certain of what they had witnessed shortly after it occurred. So what do you think of the Tennessee Wildman? Let us know in the comments below, and as always, please like and subscribe.